Hi, everyone. This is Angel, and thank you. You are about to listen to Season 8, Episode 8 of The Fix, where Larry and I were doing our usual discussions about some of the things going on in Major League Baseball, and I had a teaching moment about the front leg. Well, you're hearing this introduction because after doing the podcast, I felt like I didn't teach thoroughly the topic that was at hand. And I think it's because the first part of the podcast was so serious about what's going on in Major League Baseball that I kind of lost track and the podcast was going on. So I want to tell you that part 2 of this next podcast is going to be out fairly soon. In fact, this thing's been sitting on my desk for a few days trying to figure out how to handle this problem of me teaching and not feeling I did a thorough job. So what is coming soon is part 2 on the topic of the stability of the front leg, which is what the teaching moment was about in the podcast you're about to hear. And I'm not only going to have photos and drills and discussion about the role and how and actually how to tackle it and how to teach it. So it's going to be a very thorough step-by-step process for all of you coaches and for your pitchers. So I wanted you to know that's coming. And I thank you again for tuning in to Season 8, Episode 8. And hey, you know what? There's 3 strikes in baseball. I get a second chance. So anyway, enjoy the podcast, and the next episode is coming soon. Thank you. Hi, everyone. This is Angel Borrelli. Thank you for tuning into The Fix. This is Season 8, Episode 8. And I have here with me again today Coach Larry Owens from Bellarmine University. Hey, Larry.
Hey, Angel. Thanks for having me again.
How you doing today?
Doing great. Doing great.
That's great. So, everyone, I want to remind you about Larry's background because when we dive into the first topic, I want you to understand his expertise on the topic. So, Larry is, as you know, the head coach for Bellarmine University, which is a D1. And he was the pitching coach for the White Sox minor league system. And he is also a lefty pitcher. And I can tell you that he is because I've seen proof. He sent me video. He's still got the stuff. So I think we can trust what he says about everything. So once a lefty, always a lefty, right?
You're absolutely right.
Absolutely. So, Larry, the reason why I wanted to bring up your background is because you are going to be my little expert witness on this topic that is in major leagues. So, I have appropriately named your segment Sticky Fingers. Guess what we're going to be talking about?
I wonder what.
I know. So everyone, I knew Larry was going to give us his expertise, but I said to myself, I wonder how some of the pitchers who are younger and who aren't at the major league level, maybe they're not even in college yet. I said, I wonder how kids feel about this, because I have to admit, well, firstly, I've been so happy that the last podcast that I've had, and I've let all of you know I've been doing research on fingers for the last year or so, starting with the podcast called Get a Grip, and then the last 4 or 5 having something to do with gripping the ball. I'm so glad that I've sort of been ahead of this thing with giving you information about the real way to do things. And even though what started me on the trail of studying the fingers is because there's all this talk about spin rate. And I absolutely hated it when it first hit the scene, as I hated all the things that were coming out when people were chasing velocity. So chasing velocity, now we're chasing spin rate. And of course, I say, well, I've got to get with the program. And my job is, well, if they want more spin, they better understand their fingers. So I have to admit that I have been sort of naive. I didn't really know about all this stuff. I know that guys frequently put sweat on their hands from their hair. And I know that they use a rosin bag. But, I work with pitchers, and I've never seen a pitcher other than some dirt. I've never noticed anything with any pitchers. They're not using it on my watch. So I have actually been naive. So when I heard about all this and then the spin rate controversy, I said, wow. So in knowing that we would need to talk about this, I decided to call 3 of my pitchers. So Larry, I called a 13-year-old Rollin Covey, who pitches for Ali Cepeda baseball here in Pleasant Hill. He happens to be Orlando Cepeda's son. He's got a great baseball league. Rollin is 13, and you've seen him before on some of the shows we've done. And he is in seventh grade, and he's quite the brainiac. And I called Miles Liu, who is a 15-year-old. He's a junior at a high school in San Jose, and he's also a wonderful pitcher and another brainiac. And then I called Preston Ewing, who is headed off to a D1, Samford in Alabama, in the fall. And I just asked them a few questions. And rather than going through all the details of what they said, it was so interesting to hear their responses. And what was awesome is to hear the youngest response to the response of a junior in high school who's an adult, and then another adult who is heading off, and the interesting things that they said. So the most interesting thing that Rollin, the 13-year-old, said is, I said to him, because I'm trying to convert him to be a Yankees fan, and it's not an easy job, but he's a Cole fan. So I said, Rollin, what did you think when you heard Cole say, I couldn't grip the ball today, I didn't know where it was going? And I hated when I heard that, Larry. I'm like, you're a pitcher. So I said, Rollin, what did you think when you heard Cole say that? He jumps in, he goes, I know how to grip the ball. I was confused when he said it. I know how to grip the ball. And I thought it was like so perfect because, yes, he knows how to grip the ball. So then I said, well, what do you think about all this stuff? He says, well, what's bothering me is maybe they're not as good as they seem to be because they're using it. And then he said, and why would you use it in the first place? And of course, the innocence of those questions, but so much the truth about, yes, why would they use it in the first place? And I said, well, do you know anybody who uses it? And he says, no. And I said, would you ever consider using it? He says, no. He says, I know how to locate my pitches and make them work. He says, my pitches work. I like doing it the real way. And I'm like, wow, is that not the perfect statement?
Yeah, that's great. No, it's really good. I mean, that's says a lot.
Out of the mouth of a baby, right?
No doubt,
So
no
then
doubt.
I said to so I talked to Miles, and I asked him about what he thought about this whole scenario. And he said something very interesting to me. He said, I would love to know when in their career they decided they needed to do this. He said, what was it that made them think they needed to do this? I said, well, do you think the MLB has any responsibility in this? And he said, yes. He says, I didn't like that they did it in the middle of the season. And by the way, Rollins said that too. And he said, but there, where did it actually start? When did it actually happen? And he says, and I think not only the MLB and their timing, but he said something else interesting. He said, the MLB seems like they're under some pressure. First, they add the pitch clock. Then they're trying to add all this data and they're doing everything. And he says it's sort of like they're trying to make, the public happy or something. And he says, so I kind of blame them. He says, but one thing I know is that, and he mentioned a pitcher who was with another team who was not very good. And then all of a sudden now he's lights out. Now he's got lights out spin rate, which has been increasing. And he said, and you really have to wonder, how good actually are they? So I thought, again, those were salient points that they were making. So then I talked to Preston, and he said the most interesting thing. Of course, he's 18 years old. He's headed off to a D1. He's a very, very smart guy, an advanced student, a brainiac. And he said, well, you know what? He says, they're taking away jobs from other pitchers who don't use it. I said, what do you mean, Preston? You mean like because of their extra performance, they make other pitchers look bad? He says, yeah. He says, for those who don't use it, they're performing at their real level. But these guys, like, how good are they actually? So I thought that was the most interesting point. And I thought to myself, it reminded me of being in a gym, which is, of course, my background, and the bodybuilding world, which, of course, is rampant with steroids. And nobody's ever come after them the way they came after baseball with steroids. But with that being said, you're in a gym and you've got people getting ready to compete. You should see the difference in the guys that are on steroids and the guys that aren't. I mean, when you're using something that changes the way you look, it is really scary to see the difference. But I understand the way the people who are trying to compete feel, and they have to go find places to compete that are called natural contests because they could not hold a candle. And when Preston said this to me, I thought, wow, I never thought of it this way. What about the guys who aren't looking like, they're the coaches are saying your spin rate's low or this or that? How must they feel, especially now with how prevalent it is? So I found these kids to have the most amazing responses. They all thought the major league played a role. Now, I did make some calls to some college pitchers, Larry, and this is what I wanted to ask you about before we get into the other things. I called a few guys. They do not want to be named. They did not name anybody or any team or anything. They wanted, and they said, I said, do you think the use of these things is prevalent in college? They went, oh, yes, definitely. So when Miles said, gee, I wonder when this started, I thought, something must happen once they get into college. And then I thought, well, wait a second. I know a lot of universities that have installed tons of technical equipment to measure spin rate. And I know one high school here had a bunch of equipment installed with cameras and stuff so they could measure spin rate. And I thought, I wonder if what the spin rate issue is the issue that had guys searching for an artificial way to create the spin rate because it's being demanded. And I also thought, wow, too bad that I didn't talk about fingers a long time ago so that more people would actually be training the strength of their fingers and the strength of their wrist so that they could actually get the best out of their hand that they could instead of having to use a substance. So, Larry, I have a question for you regarding what these kids said. And really, I almost want you to address them in terms of their concerns, because I think the thing that I heard, especially from the two younger pitchers, is obviously their confusion about why a pitcher would do this. And yes, they do in some ways know that the pressure from the major leagues causes them to do it. But I'm wondering if kids feel a sort of a sense of hopelessness, maybe in comparison to people who might be using it that they might be, playing up against. Or, I mean, should kids be feeling lost on this topic right now? Or what can you do to address some of their concerns and maybe what they're wondering about? And maybe about the whole idea of what happens when they have that moment to make a choice where they might decide to cheat, even though we know now in the major leagues they're not going to be able to cheat. But nobody's checking high school pitchers, nobody's checking anyone else, but everybody is looking at spin rate when they come out to even look at a high school kid that might be going to college. So, what would you say to these kids who kind of are confused about the whole thing and wondering, they're saying, I know how to grip the ball, I know how to make my pitches work. What is up with what they're doing?
I think if they do worry about it, they're putting the cart before the horse, so to speak. There are many more things I think that are on their plate that pertain to pitching and getting hitters out that are much more important than worrying about how fast they spin the ball. That's my opinion. So I think it's good that a lot of the younger kids are like, it's a kind of it should be a non-issue to them. I mean, if we keep talking about it, we keep seeing it, and it keeps going on. I mean, whatever happens above us is going to trickle down eventually, and it has with the way the game's played has trickled down to us, to the amateur level, to high school, college, and even the youth players. So all this sticky stuff, or all the rosin and the sunscreen and the things that people are creating to now improve the spin on the ball. People have been using those things for a long time, but they were using them for different reasons. They were using them because of sweat, or because of maybe it was really cold and the ball was slick and you needed just to be able to control the ball. So that's where it all started, and now it's evolved into them wanting to spin the ball to gain an advantage, to gain a competitive advantage. It's like the more we talk about it and the more it comes up, the more people at lower levels are going to experiment with it, I think. And they should be worried about other things, much more important things than that. Come up with a clean delivery, a safe and efficient delivery that they can repeat, and then their workloads, and understanding how to play the game, and learning how to hold runners, and learning the bunk coverages, and learning where to go during rundowns. What about when the ball's put in play? What bases I need to back up and why? And learning how to play the game as opposed to a middle schooler or a young high school kid worrying about how fast he spins the ball. I think they're much more important things that they're going to need to navigate and learn how to play the game before they worry about spinning the ball. It's going to trickle down, and it is. And guys are going to experiment. Guys are going to, little league coaches or travel ball coaches or dads or brothers or former teammates, or stuff's going to come down. They're going to learn about it, and they're going to experiment with it. So it's kind of really it's weird where it's gone now. It's really strange where rosin and pine tar and sunscreen and went from being able to grip the ball to command it a little bit, has gone to now they're cracking down on it in the big leagues, and it's all trickling down.
Yes, well, I can say with certainty the three pitchers that I interviewed first are stellar pitchers, and pitchers that go and work with someone. They're pitchers that want to do things right, and these three guys didn't in any way express any like fear about it or wondering. But the fact that they even know it exists, which is exactly to your point, the more it's talked about now, these kids may be in leagues and things where kids are experimenting with it because only 10% of the population of pitchers really are concerned about how they do what they do. Most are considered with what they do, but this isn't just their fault. It's just like, yes, we can sit here and say, hey, guys, you're in high school. Don't chase velocity. Don't chase spin rate. Chase good mechanics. Make your forearms strong so it doesn't get sore. Make your wrist and fingers strong so you can get and do with the ball what you can do. But when scouts come to look at them, and when they go to these camps, the data on a kid from a camp is like as if he's a major league pitcher, and they're putting the numbers up against others. So I think there is a trickle down effect, just like you said, from what's being done at the major league level, not just in performance, but in the way they're expecting it. And there was a pitcher or a coach that was interviewed when all of the stuff came down with Glass now, when he came out and said he got hurt. He thinks he got hurt on that first outing in his forearm and in his elbow from that one outing where he didn't have anything that to grip with. Well, when they go in and do surgery, they're going to be able to tell how old those injuries are. But if you aren't gripping the ball tight enough, you're not actually, if the ball's slipping out, it's because your grip isn't tight enough. And if anything, when a muscle's not being activated, I'm trying to figure out how he would tear it. So there's something unusual unless he was overthrowing and possibly changing his mechanics because he didn't feel he had a grip. But, it's weird to somebody listening who says, well, if you're holding something and you're not gripping it tight enough, grip tighter. I mean, I work with grips all the time. I'm looking and I say, hey, I just filmed you. The ball rolled up too soon. You need a better grip. I tell them where they've got to get better grip in the motion, and they do it. So it is kind of unusual, but though some pitchers did come out or coaches came out and said, the pitchers did this to themselves because it was okay to use it, like you said, Larry, for sweat purposes, for something that allowed them to do their skill. But they started upping it, coming up with better formulas, more sticky formulas, apparently. And so then they started getting this performance change, not something that allowed them to do their skill, but actually enhanced it to a level that was unnatural because of the substance. So it was substance abuse for their skill. And that's how they got into trouble, because there were complaints because of what, the hitters were seeing, et cetera, and what the ball was doing. So yes, I really hear you. And I hear that, yes, and I'm all about that, doing things right. That this is even in the arena right now is scary. And what do you think about the fact that the way this is being done on the field? I mean, we've had two pitchers take their pants down in the middle of the field, and I'm like, and yes, these are guys with egos, and another guy is coming up running his fingers through your hair. And these are guys that are supposed to be in command of the game. They're the guys on the mound. And then it's almost in a way disrespectful. I mean, it should be done in a way where not the audience, the whole world isn't seeing it. And then also the fact that the coach on the opposing team, I mean, I'm a Yankees fan. I love Joe Girardi when he was with the Yankees. I hated when I saw what he did and the way he acted. And I said to myself, what is going on here? What do you think about all that?
There's a lot to unpack. Well, are you referring to Girardi with the Scherzer thing yesterday with him coming
Yes,
out of the
where
dugout?
well, 3 times, and also they got into it, and, I mean, it was like one time, then another, and of course, when he was interviewed, he said, "Hey, listen, I've been watching him for years, and I believe him, and he's never rubbed his hair that much, and I believe he noticed that too." And then Scherzer said, "Yeah, I actually was trying to get sweat because my fingers were, getting sweaty. And it was the only thing I could think of. It's the wettest part of my body, and it's the only thing I could think of. Blah blah blah." But they had the umpire go out and check him a number of times, and that's when he got upset and he started unbuckling his pants. Like, okay, like, have at it. And I just, right in the middle of the field, for the world to see. It just felt issues on both sides, but still the way it's being done. I mean, can't Major League Baseball come up with something that's a little more classy?
Yeah, you would think. Now, I don't know. I mean, I think the manager of the Cardinals brought this up when it kind of first came to light. I think they checked Joe West checked the reliever's hat when he came in the ball game, and they wanted to check it first before he pitched because they didn't want to eject him if he was using anything or if he had pine tar on his hat or whatever. And then the manager of the Cardinals brought this up that you really want to go down this road. That's it's not going to be good, and they're going down this road where they're going to crack down on this in the middle of a season, and it's kind of becoming, it's ridiculous. I think it's not ridiculous that someone can gain an advantage by being able to spin the ball a little better than they would if they didn't use anything. However, if you simply use rosin and a little sweat, you can get your hands really sticky and tacky, and the ball actually stick to your hand. You can hold your hand up; it'll stick to your hand. I mean, it's very tough to navigate. I don't know how they're going to enforce. You know how they're going to enforce it. They're going to check people, but checking them every time they come off the mound, or if the other manager requests it, you got to check them. And he turns out. I mean, I think he's right. You can be careful what you wish for sometimes because. Oh my! Now what are you going to do? Not let them use anything? I mean, now you guys throwing 95, 100 miles an hour, and they're not allowed to use anything. The ball, one guy sweats more than another, and the ball's just slipping out of his hand. You're going to kill somebody. So there's a fine line. I mean, it's a weird place. Everything's so strange now, and there's so many things that have changed in the game. Just add this one to the list, and in my opinion, all these changes aren't for the better. It's not good for the game, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, even though they say, well, there's been some use of it, it had to be at a level where nobody complained about it. It's when they started getting excessive, I guess this season and last season that it came to bear. So what it ended up doing is it ended up causing a problem for even mild use. And that's why some are saying, and, this thing with the slippery ball, I mean, I'm around pitchers all the time that don't use it, of all different levels, that don't use anything. And the reason I know is I'm around them when they're performing well. I hand them a ball. They hand it back to me. There's nothing going on. I see them rubbing it. And I've seen, now that I think about it, things that they've done, but it has nothing to do with any substance. And they give me the ball back. So it's sort of like if they need something, there should have been some regulation. So in some ways, when you close an eye to something you see happening, that can present a problem, and then it can actually get worse. But yeah, I mean, it's funny that baseball's been around all this time. We've had guys that throw 100 miles an hour. Issue has never come up. So either it was being kept to a minimum, which I think we're both saying if it's necessary, that would be the way it needs to be, but it got excessive. And so what pitchers did is they kind of maybe ruined it for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen guys in professional baseball that use strategically put a little pine tar somewhere or sunscreen and rosin on their arms and kind of use it. Maybe they sweat a lot, and then a lot of times you see it, guys in the southeast. It's very humid in the southeast, and guys sweat a lot, and sometimes sweat just drips down their arm onto their hand. I mean, and so yeah, use what, in my opinion, the hitters were fine with it. Use whatever you need, as long as you don't hit me in the head with that thing. If you need it to command the ball, so be it. But my goodness, I don't know. It's been around a while, but I haven't seen it a lot. I haven't really seen it a lot, if any, with our club. In college, I don't really, nothing really sticks out to me. I haven't really paid that much attention. I've talked to some coaches that say, "Hey, watch this guy. He goes to his pants a lot, or he goes to his pocket, or what have you." But it hasn't been a real concern for me. I would be more concerned about guys scuffing the ball or putting something on the ball to throw. Guys don't throw spitters anymore. You don't hear of it, but you can sure scuff the ball and make it move. But hell, and a lot of times in college or in high school, you show up with a high school team might have a dozen baseballs or three or four baseballs to use, and those balls get scuffed all to hell during the game, and they're using them. But you start throwing a scuff ball harder, it starts moving. But this is a different way or a new way that they've discovered how to doctor or tinker with a ball to make it do what they want to do. They want to spin it faster than this is what they're using, apparently.
Right. Well, it may be time to think about the baseball itself. Okay, that's one thing. And the other thing is, because we're talking two different things here. When I was talking about teaching a pitcher, like all my pitchers work on their fingers, their wrist, their forearm, all the things that are involved in grip. And it's slipping out of the hand because you aren't gripping it is different than it's slipping because your hand sweats and you've got part of your hand and part of your fingers on smooth parts of the ball. That's a different thing. You can't train that. You can't train body temperature. You can't, now what might be interesting is pitchers trying to figure out pitches where they've got more, contact with the actual seams, which is really the part of the ball that they should be able to grip and hang on to. It may have to do with the height of the seams, the width of the seams. Somebody maybe needs to look at the whole baseball design issue if that's what's coming up. But yeah, but that's something completely separate when it slips because of sweat than it is about the grip. But I think one thing is absolutely for sure. The pitchers that are complaining are making it sound like it's not so much a sweat issue as it is a grip issue. And now they're saying that this is why they're hurting themselves. Well, to that point, I say that is, to me, that's when I was happy that when I spoke to these three young pitchers, they were like, "What do you mean? My grip is fine. I can locate pitches without anything." So I think that's a separate issue, but I do agree with you. Pandora's box has been opened, and I hope that they come up with a way to make this a little more respectable. Yeah, and I think that it's gotten out of hand and it is definitely crazy. So, yeah, and also the other thing is it's sort of like the pitchers. How much are they going to pick on the pitchers, Larry? Pitch clock, move the mound back. I mean, come on.
All this stuff started with, for whatever reason, we had to speed the game up. So you got to
Yes.
speed the game up. These silly little rules go in to speed the game up when one of the main things that slows the game down is because they're on TV.
Yes.
So address everything but the problem. So we're going to change the way the game's played because we want to play it faster, so we get more of an attentive or more of an audience or more attentive audience, and then you had all the analytics come into play, and so this is the result of the analytics.
Yes, and baseball is always being picked on. Does anybody say let's speed up the game of golf?
No, Mm-mm.
They play 18 holes on TV. Does anybody say, let's speed the game of golf up? I mean, it is a crazy thing that's happening. But I don't like within the game of baseball that everything that has to do with the pitchers, and this may be opening up something that's going to prove positive. When you work in the field of science, you look at what's being done and you say, well, why is it being done? And like you pointed out so well, something that I didn't realize that about the sweat and the hand and the slipperiness of it. And I understand that when they say a ball just slipped out of their hand. And I've had pitchers in a bullpen, I'll go, what was that pitch? And they go, it just slipped out of my hand. And then the next one doesn't. And it's because they just momentarily, as a human being, didn't have a grip, just like we might drop something. We might have our keys and then we drop it. You're thinking you didn't grab it the right way. You might drop something. That's human. But what I think is interesting is pitching. And it's why I got into this business and I'm passionate about it. Because maybe sometimes things that are happening mean why we need to look at this. We need to look at, yeah, if it's getting dangerous because the ball's slipping, because pitchers have gotten so good, and this is even without using anything. Maybe we need to look at the ball. Maybe we need to look at this. Maybe we need to look at that. And I think that sometimes we just go for what is being done and not asking why is it being done, which brings me to another topic that is so important because, as you know, I am in the corner of it's how you do what you do, not just what you do. And this is another way that I think pitchers are, it's something, let's just put it this way. I wonder about why there is such a difference in the way that hitting and making adjustments to a hitter, to a guy, maybe between appearances, why every hitter works consistently on trying to make adjustments on where his front foot lands, how it lands, when it goes down, how much weight in the back leg, how he brings his hands through, that he chokes up, he doesn't choke up, he gets under, he gets over, he gets around, he opens his hip up, he keeps his front shoulder closed. I mean, they go into detail about hitters, and hitters after every game are working on making small adjustments because hitting coaches and where the ball goes, and they can see errors. And hitting a ball is a very difficult thing. I don't know how they do it, but a pitcher has a precision skill as well. And he's actually trying to not have the guy who has his precision skill hit his pitch. So when I watch a lot of baseball, I have to, and I watch a lot of baseball news shows, and I'm always interested, Larry, in why is it that it is absolutely okay to talk about this hitter's making this adjustment. And last week he was under the ball. So now he's like, look at his leg lift, and they'll do an analysis. They'll say, see how he lifts his leg now, and look how and he knows he's got to get his foot down. When you really look at it, it's so much like pitching. Yet, when it comes to pitching, it's like, no, 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 don't touch this pitcher, even when he's not doing well. It's like there's this mystique or this aura around pitching and making adjustments, as if, oh no, don't touch him, or even looking at him in the way of saying, hmm, you know what? He's not getting his foot down in the right way, or his front leg isn't stable. Or every time he goes to throw, just as he throws, he loses his balance and he falls all over. I mean, I see some follow throughs that are literally hard for me to look at, and I'm wondering, why is it that everything is about hitting, everything's about adjustments to the hitters? They're allowed to do this. It's like part of their job. It's nothing to hear a hitter say, I got to work on this. And they're filming themselves and then they're making adjustments. Why is it that that much care isn't allowed or given to the pitchers and their mechanics and how what they need, and why to improve performance someone doesn't look at the way they're doing it the way they look at the way the hitter does it? Why is that, Larry?
I don't know. I think you got to have a pitcher that's not fearful of change and somebody that's with them or that's trying to help them that's not fearful of that change. I think the biggest hurdle to overcome would be overcoming that fear that if I do make this change and he injures himself or he gets hurt, then wow, that's tough to swallow. So I think people are a little reluctant to change. That's one of the main reasons, maybe, to make adjustments or to make small changes or large changes for that matter.
Why isn't it? Why aren't they scared of the adjustment with the hitter?
There's less risk of injury. I mean, you're not
Hmm.
going to hurt anything, not going to injure them, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
There's always that fear that you're going to blow his elbow out or blow his shoulder up or some type of injury because you get kids used to throwing a certain way for so long and then you change it, and is it worth the change? And that's the thing I think of. Just if I do this and he hurts himself, wow, what a goof I'm gonna. That's a bad move. Is this worth fixing? And if you, I think, have someone that's confident enough in the result of the change, and you got to get kind of both sides to believe in it and want to do it, then you do it. And I think that the more experience somebody has in doing those things or making those changes, and probably going to feel more comfortable doing them. The folks that are maybe less experienced and a little more apprehensive aren't going to be so quick to make those changes or make adjustments that more often than not, I would say, help pitcher. So I think that's the big hurdle. Is he going to get hurt if we make an adjustment? And whereas a hitter, you're not going to hurt anything more than likely.
So I think the take home message from all of this, and also, and this actually ties in with what we're saying with finding artificial ways to create spin or finding gimmicks to create velocity. I think that you're right that a lot of this stuff it comes from, actually, this is baseball. Here we are in the major leagues. The hitters make adjustments all the time. The pitchers don't. Pitchers get injured more. Why isn't it when pitchers started getting injured more that people weren't worrying about it? I mean, right now there's as many position players injured as hitters. I mean, there's so much going on with position players: wrists, fingers, hamstrings, groins, right side, left side, obliques, back. And it's like, I think that and I guess this is a message that I want all the coaches who listen to me, because I get so many calls from coaches. And lately I've been getting tons of calls from pitchers, which I absolutely love. But I think at an early age, we have to start taking care of the pitchers better. And we have to start taking care of trying to have them do what they do correctly, just like you do with kids in every other walk of life. You don't just send them to school, you actually want them to learn something. You're not just saying, oh, I hope he gets a high school degree. You actually want him to learn something in high school. At an early age, there has to be more consideration for the pitcher who is maybe gifted, but the way he's getting it done, you absolutely know he could not survive. You absolutely know that you can't use the body that way. But for pitching coaches at that age, to have somebody say, hey, yeah, he's got a good arm, but he is going to hurt himself. When you have a pitcher that you see at an early age with that kind of thing. And you all know who I'm talking about, because he was gifted with an arm, but doesn't know how to harness his body into doing it correctly. This has got to send some flags up. And I want all the coaches to start to think about this dilemma that I see in the major leagues and in minor leagues, where guys are losing their job as adults because they're doing something the way they're used to doing it. Well, why don't we start taking care of the younger generation and saying, hey, if this doesn't look right, it isn't right, and let's start working on it now with him. The problem is that everyone wants the W no matter how old the team is. And I think that to make an inroad on all of these things that are happening, which in the end, we don't want anyone to get injured, we have to start really looking at, I think, pitchers in a different way, especially at a younger age, and maybe get some coaches that can handle making some adjustments with these kids so they do things correctly. But it's very upsetting to me that in another way, pitchers are always being disregarded. And it's why I got into this business. I feel like that they're not given enough help at an early age, and that a lot is demanded of them as they get older, and that as long as they're throwing a strike, no one cares how they do it. Do you agree that with anything I'm saying?
No, absolutely. And I think a lot of times, maybe at the youth baseball level, I mean, some people may be apprehensive to help folks because they just don't feel like they know the subject well enough, or they,
Well, yes, and I've always said coaches at a youth level should be the most have the they should be paid.
yeah,
This should be a profession. No, it should be a profession, just like umpires. There should be a little youth pitching coach school, so that so the kids, because that is the formative years. I mean, you pay teachers. I mean, the most important teachers are in grade school, because if you don't learn the alphabet and you don't learn how to write and you don't learn math, addition and subtraction and division, you're going to not make it through the seventh and eighth grade. You're definitely not going to make it in high school. So, in some sense, we already know that the beginning is always the most important part. And yes, and I want coaches, I will never stop saying this, because somewhere out there, and I know they're out there because I get calls. The first thing I say to a coach when he calls me to ask a question about mechanics, or he says, I have a kid that's doing this. What do you think? And he wants to know and he wants to learn. I say, you know what? I love that you called, and your kids are lucky because he's asking that question. And listen, coaches, when you see something in youth pitchers, and this is true even at your level, Larry, with college guys, if you see, there are certain things that if you see it, it's giving you an indication that something is going on with that pitcher in terms of his mechanics. And I think the easiest thing and this was the topic I wanted to share with everyone today, and I'll do it very quickly because I want to send everyone on an assignment. And you can do this while you're watching Major League Baseball. You can do this while you're watching your next college game. You can do this when you're watching your youth kids. I want everyone to look at one of the most important features. And this goes right along with gripping the ball, because this has everything to do with how well the ball is going to move through the hand and be released. I want everyone to start watching the landing leg of the pitcher. And I want to start with giving my eye candy award to Dallas Keuchel, who has the best front leg in baseball. Keuchel gets an A plus. DeGrom gets an A minus because sometimes he lets his foot go a little bit, but DeGrom's front leg is so stable that the other day, as he was turning on it and after he delivered the ball, he was so stable on his front leg while his right leg was spinning around that the ball got hit back to him. He reached out and caught the ball in his glove, and his right leg wasn't even down yet. Did you see that catch, Larry?
no, it did not. It did
Oh,
not.
you have to be on the front leg. And then the next team puts in a pitcher, and you notice I mention names when they're doing a good job. I will never tear down a pitcher who isn't. No, because that's somebody's son, that's a human being. And you know what? Nobody's helped him. Nobody's helped him or taught him. But then I'll see the next pitcher, and everybody watch this, and you're going to see this in the major leagues. In fact, this season I'm seeing more good front legs than before. Otani has a pretty good front leg for somebody his size. If you see, he's got control over his motion. He's quite athletic. But what you're going to see are pitchers, there's a lot of good front legs out there, but then you'll see a pitcher. He lands, he sinks down in the front leg when his back leg comes up, and then he falls off to the side looking like a mess. When the pitcher has a finish that is so ugly, like he falls down the side of the mound, that imbalance in the way he's moving his body through space is happening the moment before he's getting ready to release the ball. Now, talk about not being able to have a good grip on the ball. If you're falling over, let's say you're a righty, you're falling over to the left, off the mound. I'm talking about in a crazy way, just as your right hand is releasing the ball. Talk about having a hard time holding on to the ball. Talk about having the right timing for the ball rolling up in the hand. Talk about having the wrist be behind the ball. If you're having a balance problem, a center of mass movement problem during your stride, so much so that your front foot can't be stable as you're applying force, then you've got a problem that is brewing. And the cool thing is, everybody knows when we walk around, our feet are flat on the ground. Okay, everybody knows how to walk, and we know how to go upstairs. And when you're going upstairs, you're on one leg at a time. When you walk, you're on one leg at a time. If you can, at an early age or even later, if you can stabilize the landing of the front foot, you can make the whole motion adjust itself backwards from that so that the ball can be delivered more efficiently. The arm is in a more efficient place because it's not being used to balance you. And the cool thing about this, coaches, and this is for you too, Larry, get your strength coaches out on the field. If you see a guy falling over, I don't care if he's throwing strikes or not. If his follow through looks funny to you, get your strength coach out there and say, come here, look at this. Because that strength coach would never allow him to fall all over if he's doing a lunge in the gym. If he's doing an RDL, and guess what? The front leg is a lunge and an RDL, and strength coaches hearing this know exactly what I'm talking about. And if you can't get a guy to turn into that placement, well, there's a problem with his physique. And trust me, he's the guy in the major leagues that's going to get hurt, or in the minor leagues, or maybe even in college. He's the kid that if you train that now, and it's one of the easiest things to train because it's single leg balance. Now, I want everyone to watch Keuchel's front leg. I tried to find something on him on YouTube. There was a 2018 YouTube thing. He was from the rear side. He was throwing a pen, so he wasn't throwing hard. And guess what? His foot was down in that as well. But it's the way that he uses his hip. And Larry, I know you're a lefty. So when he reaches out with his right leg, so everyone, the pitcher is sideways when he reaches out with his leg. When his front leg lands, he is sideways momentarily, and then he's going to turn onto that. He's going to turn towards the hitter, and all of that turning is occurring from that front leg with some help from the rear leg and pelvis. But the initial turning is in a righty's left leg and in a lefty's right leg. And the muscle under the butt, there's rotating muscles that are responsible and helping the pelvis turn. So we've got all these deep muscles. And when you watch Keuchel rotate around his leg, you just don't see the outer muscles stabilizing him. You can see the depth of it so much that as he's on one leg, he can lift the back leg, swing it around, not losing balance, not even making his plant leg shaky. He swings it all the way around, brings it over, and then puts it down. That's when you know you're stable. And there are great pitchers that do that. And like I said, DeGrom, he is an amazing pitcher. And his mechanics are such that he's been able to increase. I just saw he's put 5 miles an hour on his fastball. His average fastball is 99 right now. 5 years ago, it was 93. That to me is the way it's supposed to be. Now, how do you get that to happen? Your basic foundational skills as a pitcher have to be good to where you're not working against a ceiling of improvement that you've created because you're not doing something right. If you're not doing something right, you're not going to improve. You'll stay wherever you're at. If you're doing everything right, you're going to be able to continue to improve. So the front leg being stable and that stability, the weight goes through the hip into the foot and the way the foot relates to the ground. So what we want to see, and this is the same in hitting, they talk about that front foot has to go right to where it needs to go. So, and in hitting, the pitcher pulls himself back, the hitter pulls himself backward instead of going over it. But he's got to have a stable base to swing around that leg. The pitcher has to go into that leg and swing around that leg. If that leg is stable, his rotation will be stellar, and then he's going to have the most velocity. And guess what? His hand will have the time to do what it has to do. A lot of times you'll see a pitcher, his arm is flailing because his left side has started to pull off, or his right side in the case of a left-handed pitcher. So the single leg balance, so the single leg, the single ankle into the ground, stabilized where it doesn't move at all. Larry, do you know what I'm talking about when you think about pitchers, or you may even know Dallas Keuchel, where his leg, or DeGrom, where the leg is down and it stays.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think of it. Yeah, tell me if I'm wrong. I think of it as, once it's down, I always tried to think of just this way I thought of it. The angle at which my thigh to my shin, the angle of my knee, however I landed, I wanted it to more or less stay at that angle if I could. I didn't want to sink in it. I didn't want to lock it out real bad. I wanted it to stay stable and firm, and then work out over your front leg to throw the ball. I've always felt that the more stable it was, and you just kind of confirmed it. I think
Right.
that you're going to throw the ball as hard as you physically probably can, but more importantly, you're probably going to command the ball as well as you can command it. The more stable and under control your delivery is. To me, when I think of your front leg stability, I think of you're under control. You're not
Yes.
stepping one. You probably have good direction.
Right.
You're probably landing. What the way I term it is, I want you to work back to front, not side to side. You want your backside to move forward, not come around so much, and not. I don't know. That's how I term it. I don't want to work side to side. I want to work back to front. And if you have a stable front leg, it works great.
No, you're absolutely right. Yes. And here's the thing that's the beauty of this, and I'm going to say this to all the coaches out there that are working with kids. They can be taught this. This is simple. But if they know that they're supposed to land on one leg, make them stand on one leg on flat ground. Make them go on the hill and stand on one leg down the hill, and then they can learn the skills. Bring someone out there who knows how to teach strength movements, because it's just a matter of teaching balance for that position. You can't teach balance for this skill by standing on a ball and teaching balance. Balance is specific to the skill. So don't put them on a 2x4 and ask them to pitch on a 2x4 so you can see that they stay in balance. No, put them on the hill, downhill, so they know how to process their ankle. But here's the thing. When an athlete knows you're supposed to land here and your foot's supposed to be stable, so much so that when your back leg comes off the ground as you go forward into your follow through, that leg still is stable. If they know they're supposed to do that, they will automatically rearrange the way they get there. And they'll come off their back leg with a knee lift that's better and more efficient than maybe swinging, like you said, Larry, swinging the leg around and going side to side with their motion. If they know where they're supposed to land, they will automatically adjust the way they get there. And what that ends up doing is cleaning up the beginning of the motion, and it cleans up the landing. And everything about the pitching motion is how you get off to that start. And in every sport, in gymnastics, you get scored for your landing. It doesn't count if you did a million spins in the air, if when you land, you don't land correctly. And the reason is, if you aren't managing the skill you're doing before you land, if your landing isn't good, it exemplifies that you are not managing the skill prior to that. And in pitching, if you are heading downhill and turning, if that base isn't there and you follow through and you can't manage, that leg is off, that means that the way you landed on that leg and where your body weight was not over that leg. And our legs are supposed to be underneath us, which is what you're saying, Larry, which is there's a certain angle, that when it lands, it's stable. And that tells you that pitcher knew how to get that weight in it. And now on the rest of the motion that occurs over that leg, it's going to be efficient. And then when he goes into his follow through, and that's what you'll see in Keuchel, his front leg is sturdy enough to handle. In fact, he threw a pitch and I thought, he looks like he's moving so slowly. And it was a 98-mile-an-hour pitch that I happened to see. And when I see this, I go, wow, this is beautiful. But you can actually see his rotators in his hip. And then he has stability as he follows through. And that's what we need to have. And this correlates with all this stuff about the hand and the forearm. If your front leg is falling off during your follow through, you weren't on that leg. And if you were on the leg, your arm would be able to do what it does. But if you're off balance, your arm is being used to keep you in balance. So your arm's going to go too far out to the side instead of going forward. It's going to have a release point that is responding to what your balance is doing, not responding to what you want to do with that ball, which is release it forward. And so everyone right now, while this sounds like it's a distant connection to the way we started this conversation, everything in pitching is about the hand and the fingers and the way you release the ball. Everything about injuries is about saving the arm. The arm cannot be saved if the base isn't solid. And the easiest way to tell if your pitcher is in the safe zone or in a danger zone is by looking at how he finishes what he does. So the guy who doesn't finish right, he's being set up for all these injuries, possibly needing substances to get done what he wants to do. Let's try to get our guys doing everything correctly. And this one adjustment here, it's not going to affect the arm except in a good way. And it's the easiest thing to do. And for those of you, Larry, like you at your level, where you have a strength coach that you can call over and say, fix his front leg landing. There are a million ways to do this. And what happens is the pitcher doesn't change anything about who he is as a pitcher. He's changing something about his stability. And that's the easiest way we can start to make an inroad on not only injury prevention, but improving the pitch the way that everyone seems to be obsessed with. That's why they're going out and using all kinds of gimmicks to throw harder and hold the ball and spin it better. Well, let's look at getting the pitcher going straight forward in a stable way, and that's going to improve the pitch itself. So if you improve the pitcher's body, you're going to improve the pitch on its own. It will organically improve. So I want everyone to become obsessed with the front leg and go ahead and watch how many guys, there's tons of them this season that are doing it right. And when you see it right, it looks beautiful. And you'll know why I call this segment Eye Candy, because when I see it, it makes me very, very happy. So there's a little tip for getting especially the kids going on the right track.
Awesome. Good stuff. No, I think it's huge. It's a simple piece
Simple.
that, so sometimes gets not a lot of people pay attention to it, but yeah, it's huge. It's greatly important. It's just to me, it's and the guys that do it look like it's effort, like you mentioned a minute ago. It's effortless. It's easy. It looks so easy. It's not max effort. It's not violent. I mean, it's a violent act, but it looks, gosh, it's easy. That's easy 95. That's controlled.
And they're managing their physique. A pitcher has to manage his physique. And remember, the pitcher is not running down the hill. See, that's the problem with all this work that was being done with push off hard, push off hard.
Yep. Yep.
It's a controlled movement. The foot lands and the body's supposed to stay behind it so the arm can go forward. If your body weight isn't behind you, you're going to push into the toe and you'll end up in your follow through falling forward, but the foot comes off. You're supposed to be winding your way around that leg. the leg reaches out, the body turns on top of that leg or around that hip. It's actually turning around that hip. Then the body goes over that leg, and the follow-through leg is, the back leg is up, and then the pitcher stands up ready to do the next thing. It's not supposed to be land, turn over it, and then the second you go forward, that leg starts giving way, or your foot gives way from the ground because your body weight's not in the right place. You know, when we walk, we put our foot down, our body weight comes immediately over it, and then we move forward and the body weight's transferring on that standing foot. Then we go to the other foot. You're always bringing your weight over the foot to make the next move. If you never get your weight over it, you can't do a good follow through. And if you don't do a good follow through, if you don't see a good follow through, that means something happened with his weight. So now you're going to have velocity issues and balance issues. And remember, when you go to fall, your arm goes out to save you. We don't want a pitcher's arm to be saving him from his balance problem. And therefore, his delivery is a victim of his front leg. We want his arm to be free to do what his magic is, and he wouldn't be on the mound if he didn't have some magic. So that's my tip for the day. And of course, I'm passionate about helping pitchers, and I'm just hoping that we get saved through this era that we happen to be in right now. But I'm not going to ever stop feeling passionate about being their defense attorney. So thank you for putting up with my passion in this podcast.
No, it's great.
Someone's got to do this job.
Absolutely.
Someone has to do this. Do it right. It's not what you do, it's how you do it. And if you do it right, what you do is going to improve on its own. And I want people to believe in that. And coaches, if you've got young kids, please start this at an early age. This should be part of the development. They will love you for it. It really is no different than every other way you teach kids to be. You know, let's not let them get away with doing something incorrectly just because the end product seems to be good. So anyway, well, Larry, thank you so much for all your insight today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Sticky finger section of the podcast. Well, we've been discussing the sticky situation for 2 podcasts. I'm certainly hoping the next podcast we have some good news to talk about with the way they're getting this done. But anyway, thank you very much. And I will talk to everybody soon. So we had no videos today, but you can still hear this on YouTube. You can go to Instagram, you can go to iTunes, you can go to my Facebook page at Angel Borrelli Pitching, which is also my YouTube channel, to hear this podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will be talking back at you in a few weeks.